This is my note card. And I buy them a note card with their name. And I say, when an employee does a good job, send them a note in your handwriting. I try to send out 1 or 2 notes a week for people I work with. I'm amazed at the recognition. They say, thank you. You recognize me. And it doesn't cost anything. And again, it can't be a fake note. It's got to be a real note. If it's handwritten note, thank you, with your name on it, and a nice envelope with your address on the back. I find people love that recognition, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference.
So great, Dave. Thanks for joining us again. So interesting topic today, and I saw one of your comments in one of the LinkedIn posts around
I
feedback,
referred to you. Yeah, I referred to you so that we can help.
thank you so much for that. And I saw that topic. I mean, that post was around feedback and recognition, kind of things were there in that post. But so we want to talk about the importance of feedback and recognitions in performance management systems or performance management. But before I get into that part, what's the state of performance management today? I mean, where do you think the gaps are, and what are
That's
the
a
low
great
hanging
question.
fruits?
There's a lot of people nobody likes performance management because it's so difficult to do. So one of the messages about performance management is, by definition, it's almost always difficult
Mhm.
because it's hard to let people know where they stand in a positive way. There's some groups trying to say, let's reinvent performance management. It's been reinvented for decades. In general, performance management has 4 steps. The first step is what's expected.
Mhm.
Do we know what you should do? The second step is, how do you measure it? So, do you measure behaviors? Do you measure outcomes? Do you measure by percentages? Do you measure by distribution? So, what's expected? How do I know I've done it? Step 3: what happens when I meet the goal? So
Mhm.
sometimes you have a measure, but the consequence is very small. Some companies that I've been in, they have an increase of 3%, and the range is 2 to 4.
Yeah.
Well, that's not an incentive system, and so that's the third step. So step 1, what do we expect? What do we expect you to do? Step 2, how do you measure it? Behaviors, outcomes, long-term, short-term, individual, collective. Step 3, what's the consequence? If I
Mhm.
make the goal, what happens? If I miss the goal, what happens? And then
Mhm.
step 4 is, how do you have the right conversation? And in
Mhm.
performance management, what we're finding is the key step is step 4. Can you have a good conversation with an employee? Because we try all kinds of systems. We try KPI, OKRs, 9-box, management by objectives, what's expected, how do you know, what's the consequence? But if you can't have a good conversation, I put that in the middle, no system will work. And if you can have a good conversation, any system will work.
True, true. And I think the interesting point about the expectation, I feel like in every sphere of life, where you get married also, the setting the expectations is the first step, Uh, uh,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's kind of the first few steps. What's expected?
yeah,
How do you know? What's the consequence? And then,
true.
are we able to have a conversation about that? If you made your goal, what's going to happen? Can I talk about it? If you miss your goal, is there a
Mm.
consequence? And so that consequence piece is helpful, but it's the conversation that
Mm.
matters by far the most.
And you mentioned about a few things on the expectation setting part. I mean, OKRs are very dominant, and I have not much idea except for implementing in our company. Beyond that, like, but what do you think are the problems in OKRs?
Well, one of the problems is you never know the time frame. Is it for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? Two, things change. I
Mm.
remember working in a company when one of the Ukrainian war broke out, and the
Mhm.
goals that this company had set were no longer valid
Yep,
because
yep.
the context changes: inflation, deflation, oil regulation, and so setting goals becomes very difficult unless you can have an ongoing conversation.
Right,
I'm
right,
curious what you do in your company around goal setting and OKRs and KPIs.
right.
One of the companies we worked with, said, we've tried all these systems. We've tried management by objectives. We've tried OKRs. We've tried KPIs. We've tried a 9 box. And they said the latest one we tried was called Key Result Area Programs. Now think of the acronyms KRAP. It stood for crap. Uh,
Yeah,
and it didn't work very well.
right,
And my comment was, you've got to help leaders have a conversation with their employees.
right, right.
What's working? That's the feedback piece and the feedback is a form of recognition. I
Mhm.
recognize you. I know you. And that's why your recognition work, I think, Partha, is so helpful because if you give feedback in a positive way, you're recognizing the employee and what they contribute,
Mhm.
and you're recognizing the value they've created because of their contribution.
True, true. No, I think I mean, we have implemented the OKR system since about last 2 years, and I so resonate with what you say about the changing goals, particularly for a small company where it's a startup environment. So we have like within our span, we have three products. In those three products, one is more established, easier to set the goals. Okay, this is what we expect on that, and I keep on saying that 70% is this, 30% will be something which I don't know, which will come in later on. Okay.
Got it.
For the products which are like in the early stages of their development, we said like forget about OKRs. Okay, we just need to get the product market fit. You work in this direction. Kind of is how we try to do that. So totally resonate with you on the OKRs part.
And again, the key to an OKR is a conversation. And what's happening? I'm laughing because we've worked with companies, and people say, "Well, what do you want my goal to be?" I want it to be X. Okay, I'll say X, and they have no intention of meeting the goal because
Yeah.
it's outside their control. It's so variable. What you've got to have is an ongoing conversation. What are you doing? And that's the part of feedback. We
Yeah.
talk about timely feedback. We talk about specific feedback, timely, accountable, results oriented, and that kind of feedback. And I like more almost Marshall Goldsmith's work on feed forward. It's not about what you've done; it's about what are you planning to do next, so that we get a good expectation.
Right, right. And you mentioned about that the most important part being the conversation. Like, I mean, what's your thoughts around that? I mean, why is it difficult? I know it's difficult at a human level sometimes to give the negative feedback, which is there, or you didn't meet the targets, or it might be even worse, something like, I don't have the budgets for salary increments or bonus, so let me just have a tough discussion.
Yeah, and that's where the candor comes in, the authenticity. We've often said feedback in that conversation is about specifics. So we say three. This is the guidance I give executives doing it. One, help me understand. Help me understand is a tagline that says I'm going to coach you. So I
Mhm.
want to understand. It's not I'm in charge, I'm your boss. It's help me understand in feedback. Number two, the data. It's not just a perception. I don't like you, I like you. That's not very helpful. Here's the evidence. In my job,
Mhm.
here's how many students enrolled in your class. Here's the ratings you got as a teacher. Here's how many classes you missed. In your world, here's how much product you sold. Here's the customers we kept. Give me specific, concrete data. Help me understand. I'm your coach. Here's the data so that we can get better. Number three, help me
Right.
understand the data so that we can get better. And the getting
Mhm.
better is what can I do as a leader to help you? So it's both
Mhm.
sides. And we have found when you do those three, again, this isn't it's amazing, Partha, how simple some of these ideas are.
Yeah.
We do it in parenting, help me understand the data to get better. And when we
Right.
manage that, I think then performance can go up pretty dramatically.
Totally, totally. And the data part, I want to bring in the recognition angle. So, of course, not everything is very easily measurable, like, let's say, a sales job, okay, or a customer support tickets which have been solved. Those kind of things are very measurable there. Some other things are more like, you know, improving the quality of the product. Slightly difficult,
Yep.
to measure that kind of thing. So where we found it interesting, and where we see this whole recognition system feeding onto the on the performance management is, see, the basic performance only your reporting managers and people who are closely working with you will know. I don't know how good Dave is. I mean, I know, but as in like how good Dave is, I don't know because I'm not working with you. But your competences are something which a slightly wider circle will know. Okay, this guy is very analytical. This guy is very has got very good communication skills. Okay, someone who's not totally working with you all the time, but a slightly wider circle knows about that. And then the third is the values part of it. Okay, where so the company has certain values. Is this person following these values? Creativity, let's say, is one of the values. Taking initiative is one of the values. There are a larger circle will even know that. Okay, does this person come on time? Is there a mentor or something? What I'm getting onto is that we feel that
Could
when
you go over those first two again? I didn't write them down. I wrote down the values. What was the first one?
the first one was purely work performance. Okay, you were given a task.
Got it.
How did you
Got it.
perform? There, I say that only a reporting manager and people very closely working with you knows about that. Okay, the competencies, smart, communication skills, analytical, those kind of skills, slightly a wider circle knows about it. And your values might be known by a slightly even wider circle within the company. So what we are saying is that those values and core competencies can be recognized by a lot of people, and when they recognize you, Dave, thank you for mentoring me. Dave, thank you for being a great team player. That's in the recognition system. It is there. If this data feeds on to the performance management system, and if the manager has this data saying that Dave is in the top 10 percentile of team players in the company based on number of recognitions he has got from across the company, which is there. It can solve certain biases. Everyone has biases, uh, because of, I mean, however they have been working in the environment in which they've been working, they have biases. So that might just be more helpful. It is not there yet, but we are seeing that that is a direction if recognition systems move. This is how recognitions can help in the performance management system by feeding in this data. Uh, would love to know your thoughts and what you think about it.
I love it. And recognition is an interesting one because it's in the eye of the beholder, not the person. I don't
Mhm.
recognize myself. What you just said is somebody else recognizes all three of those levels: task, performance, competence, and values.
Right.
And if I'm careful about that, I can begin to build a recognition system that's good. A colleague of mine a number of years ago did a dissertation, and I'll just share the research, which was really interesting. An executive gave a talk about the future of the company. 100 people in the room. This is our future. This is where we're going. Y'all know the talk. She gave out everybody a 3x5 card. Name 5 people who are not likely to be able to go to the future. Either they lack the competence or they lack the values. Your three. They lack the competence, the performance, or the values. She collected the 100 cards.
Mhm.
Almost unanimous overlap. That's
Right.
part of recognition. We
Right.
know, and everybody else knows who's doing well and who's doing poorly. And
Right.
I mean, it was a really interesting study because if you say we have a team of 10, which person tends to be the best, which person tends to be the least, you get too good, too bad, and the other 6 are in the middle. Her
Right.
research said we know, and the recognition is defined by others, will tell you who's likely to be good and who's likely not to be so good.
True. And that's what, say, in a performance management system, all these people could not have given their feedback. Okay, so I can't give on to Dave because Dave's team, the 3 people are giving the reviews for Dave. Uh, a recognition system allows this much wider circle to give
Yeah.
this feedback onto them, and that feeds onto the performance management system. As we believe this things are going in that direction. I mean, we see a lot of companies also in who are doing performance management now starting to build up some recognition systems there, or people who are in the recognition space buying up companies in the performance management space. So it's interesting how it's moving there. Yeah,
I love that direction because I think sometimes after a while, money is not the motivator, except it's a symbol of recognition. It's
true.
interesting where I teach at the university, our salaries are public because we're a state university.
Yeah,
And the difference between $1,000 between 2 professors who are making a pretty good salary, frankly, economically doesn't mean much. But people
correct.
look up. You
True.
got $1,000 bonus more. I got 3,000. I got 5,000 increase. You got 6.
Yeah.
And it's not the money that makes a difference, it's the recognition, the symbolic value that the money brings. You must be
Correct.
valued more than me. And yet that recognition really matters. And so one of the things I've done, I can show you because I'm in my office. I coach leaders, I often buy them uh, a note card. This is my note card.
Yeah.
And I buy them a note card with their name. And I say, when an employee does a good job, send them a note
Yeah.
in your handwriting. I try to send out 1 or 2 notes a week for people I
Mm.
work with. I'm amazed at the recognition. They say, thank you. You
Yeah.
recognize me. And it doesn't cost anything. And again, it can't be a fake note. It's got to be a real note.
True.
It's not a text. It's not an email. It's not a WhatsApp. It's handwritten note. Thank you with your name on it and a nice envelope with your address on the back. Um, I find people love that recognition, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference.
Now, coming back to the main performance management, so it sounds very simple, having a good conversation, and I assume this is not limited to the quarterly or a half yearly or a yearly reviews. It's a continuous feedback and discussion which you have there, right? Uh, so what stops people from following that?
Well, let me just say, I think sometimes we make performance conversations complicated when it's part of life. One of the examples I give, and I'm not sure if you've done this, I didn't do it as much as my spouse, but if you've toilet trained a child, what
Yeah.
do? You set an
Yeah.
expectation. This is what you need to do. This is the indicator that you've done it well. And then there's a recognition. Congratulations, that's so good. And you can't wait for 6 hours. You have to recognize immediately that the child was
Right.
toilet trained. We've got to build that model in. One of the things I believe is the loudest feedback a leader gives an employee is none. Let me unbundle that. When I'm in a workshop, I say, how many of us have made a mistake at work? And we all raise our hands. We've all made a mistake.
Mm.
What if your boss doesn't talk to you?
Mhm.
What have you heard? I didn't make a mistake. It's okay. My boss doesn't care. My boss is incompetent. The loudest feedback a leader gives an employee is when they give none, because the employee hears something even though the leader may not intend it. And so I try to overcome the barriers to that conversation by saying, you're giving feedback even by not giving feedback. So make it
Mhm.
honest. Sit down with the employee. You're a coach, not a command and control. How can I be helpful? I'm here to
Mhm.
help. Here's the data. What can we do to get better? And engaging in that conversation helps the employee leave the interaction feeling better about him or herself.
Totally makes sense. And I think many companies, including us, we don't spend enough effort in training the bosses, okay, or educating the bosses. So it's not like they have been always managing hundreds of people. They have grown up there, and sometimes the coaching for the bosses is not there.
I agree. I agree.
Because
We say to somebody, here's the form to do appraisal. Fill out the form. That's not the issue. Let's train you and coach you. And when I coach leaders, sometimes I go back. I may have shared this story with you before, but and I've had many examples. Big company, very senior executive, an employee made a mistake, and it was an expensive mistake. In this company, it was global. They used email. He
Mhm.
drafted an email. You made a mistake. It's going to cost us an enormous amount of money. If you don't get better, you'll be fired.
Mhm.
That's not a great email. So I said, quickly, I responded, don't hit send. 3 changes, really simple. Number one, I care about you. That's easy.
Mhm.
Number two, you have great potential at the company. You made a mistake. It's going to cost us millions of dollars. Don't hide from that. That's the data. And then number three, what can we learn so that we improve? Don't threaten. The threat doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
Look at that difference. I care about you.
Mhm.
You have great potential. You made a mistake. Here's what we can learn to go forward. My sense is, and in this case, the specific case I'm thinking about, the employee called the manager and said, wow, that was a very helpful comment. I know I made a mistake. You acknowledged it. Now what can we learn to go forward? And they made a very good progress. It's amazing to me, Partha, that this sounds so easy, but it applies to our children. It
Yeah,
applies to our spouses. It applies to where we live, where we work, where we play, where we worship. Getting that out there just is so critical.
true, true. No, and as we are, we don't have that kind of experience in the HR systems internally, and we keep on improving on our practices. And this time we put a new all the four things which you talked about. Okay, so first we set the expectations. OKR might not be the best tool, but at least a starting place for us. We said that OKR is the expectations. Okay, so now we know what is expected from you. Tomorrow, if something goes wrong, you tell me. I know that this expectation is wrong. We we are also telling them, the results. Okay, what are we looking at from there? uh, Third point is about the uh, what's the what is the consequence of you meeting the goals, and what is the consequence of not meeting the goals. All those things we have talked. The fourth part is something which we just taken as granted. I know we have not really spent time around thinking about that. Okay, how do you have the conversations? How frequently you should have the conversation. We haven't told the reporting managers how they should do it. I think I'll take away from this call, and I'll make sure that this is conveyed to everyone. Last question from my side. So, what's new in performance management system, or where do you see this going in the future direction of performance management systems? How will it integrate with other systems in HR? I've seen a lot of your diagrams or the charts around this space, but where do you see this going?
Number one, I think we need to focus even more on the conversation, which we've said, and we've reinforced that. One tip for that that's really fun, if you're a business leader, go to the employee, or if you're an executive, go to the leaders who are doing performance management and reviews saying, what was the best performance management you ever had? When did it happen? What did they say? How did they say it? Where was the setting? Because people intuitively know what works for them. And so you can help them understand the conversation matter, number one. Number two, you got to have accountability. There was a movement a few years ago. Let's do away with all performance management. We're going to have no performance management. Everybody just does good things.
Mm,
That's not true. I think there has to be a conversation.
mm,
One of the examples I like, I don't know if you've rented a car in places where I rent a car, you pay 3 times for the petrol. So instead of petrol being 3, it costs 10 or 9.
mhm,
Guess what? Most of us fill the car up with petrol
mhm.
before we turn it in, but we don't wash the car because there's no incentive to wash the car. So I turn a
Correct.
car in that's dirty but full of gas.
Uh,
Money and incentives work, and conversations work. They change behavior. There needs to be accountability. Getting the accountability around the right things becomes critical. So, number one, conversation. Number two, accountability. Number three, integrate with the other HR systems.
mhm,
What happens is when somebody performs well, their compensation should go up. I
mhm.
gave the example. I really worked hard this year. I did incredibly success, and the range was 2 to 4% increase, and I got a 4. The person that did nothing this year got a 2. Well, next year I'm going to go get a 2. So you've got to connect it with training, with staffing, with promotions, with careers, and they need to provide an integration about what we're trying to do. So, conversation, critical kind of factor, accountability, and integration with the other HR systems.
Very interesting and very simple in that, like at least in theory it is very simple. And this reminded me of, I read this book, Netflix thing, Netflix culture, right? So they have a very direct conversation. At least that's what the book says, that everyone is given very direct feedback that is not to be taken personally. It is to be taken for their task, and everyone is given direct feedback. But somehow, because the whole culture is set in that, everyone is expecting that kind of a straight talk from everyone, so everyone expects it and doesn't get personally hurt on that. So you might have worked with the Netflix guys. I don't know about that, but I thought that was a conversation part which you're talking about. They build up the culture where it's a very straight talk, with everyone there.
Totally agree. There's a company where we live called the Other Side Academy. The Other Side Academy, if somebody looks it up, they're people who've gone to prison. So they've been incarcerated, they've been found guilty, and they can go to this academy and learn the skills of society.
Mhm.
And they live in a special house. They have a moving company. They actually move furniture. Their tagline is really good. We were in your house as criminals, so we know your furniture. Now let us come move you. The man who did it is Joe Grenny, who's Crucial Conversations, brilliant. They have straight talk. Every
Mhm.
night they meet, and if you didn't do your job on the moving company, they tell you immediately.
Mhm.
What they're finding is incredible success. People who may have been addicts, who may have not had good backgrounds, ended up in prison because of bad behavior, never got the accountability and the discipline.
Mhm.
And Joe has said these meetings are brutal because if you didn't do your job, they'll tell you, and they tell you in a spirit of love is too strong of a word for criminals, but they tell you in a spirit of support. We want you to get better. And they get the highest mover ratings of any moving company in the region because they have accountability. Straight talk. Absolutely great idea.
Yeah, straight talk, have it frequently. I think are the key messages. Now, thanks, Dave. Thanks for your time. I know a lovely talking to you.